How does it make you feel?
Honestly, pretty mad. I don't think the nigga come back.
So think it looks like it's gonna hit you. But this same movement here to get him to go that way, now come over with a cross there. That's what life is doing to you. It's presenting you a lot of fakes. There's a lot of fakes in society about what a man is. How many of you guys feel comfortable crying in front of each other? Did you know tears contain stress hormones? You ever wonder why after you cry you do feel a little better? So when you hold back that side of your humanity, that's why you snap when someone pushes you or the teacher makes you mad. You're ready to cuss them out. I want you to dig a little deeper because the next emotion is really where you can find your freedom. But you got to admit it. So, everybody say sad.
Sad.
How many in the back is going through that? You see the problem? Give it up for Matt, y'all.
Well, welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I'm your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this Saturday evening live. Yes, absolutely. The Jaybefaunt channel is also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Tuesdays for the Sabby and JB show and Sundays for the JB show at 1 p.m. Eastern. And you can catch me here regularly on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Welcome back, all of you beautiful people. So good to see you here. Just to let you guys know, if you have not already, go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out in the algorithm so that I can reach more people to help educate. They can learn with me, as well as you guys can also be activated and encouraged and inspired. So thank you very much to all of you who are tuning in right now. Also, if you guys have not already, you guys can actually subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. This gives you email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. So you guys have that there as well. So thank you. All right. And just to let you guys know, I did not mention this because this is brand new. But did you know that you can actually gift a Patreon membership to somebody? True story. Here you go. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go to patreon.com/Jaybefaunt/gift. You guys can actually gift a Patreon membership. The holidays are coming up. And so if you would like to give somebody my face, then you can do so there as well. So thank you very much as well for that. So just going to share a couple things before we get started. We have Cowboy Kitty that's in the chat right now saying hello. And they requested to put Rome's donation link in the chat while calling me a sexy beast. Cowboy Kitty, oh my goodness. Thank you so very much. But I also put the link in the chat. So if you guys want to, you guys can click on that and donate to Rome for his legal representation. I cannot speak legally about what's going on with him. However, I do know that he does need legal representation. If you guys are able to donate, please make sure to do that for Rome. It is deeply appreciated. And we do want Rome back. So thank you. And good to see Kate Mack saying, hey, JB, good to see you in here as well. So nice to have you with me on this Saturday evening. I know some people didn't realize that I was going to be going live this evening. I kind of had it in my head that I was going to, because I wanted to make sure I got this book read, throughout this week. I wanted to make sure I hit all the books that I'm reading so that everybody has these uploads in live streams. So that's why. So are you ready to talk about what we're going to be reading? This is going to be a good one. I'm telling you right now. All right. So as always, we are doing the reading for The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love by Bell Hooks. This book has been cathartic. Oh my goodness. This book has been cathartic. As a man, it's like you have somebody telling you all the things that you knew about yourself, but you didn't have the way to verbalize it as eloquently as Bell Hooks has. It's like she had a microscope and she was just microscoping and seeing men, when we are, in our seclusion, when we are together, when we are at our loneliest, when we're at our happiest, the things that were denied, the things we're given, the things that are good for us, the things that are toxic for us. It's just, I enjoy this book, And that's the reason why I showed what I showed at first. Because this gentleman was speaking with young men. And a lot of us, and I've said this before while doing these readings, is that we are denied the very, essences of ourselves, the very essences of our emotions, particularly because it serves a system in order for us to be able to be exploited by it. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. As somebody that's on the left, as somebody that's a communist, as somebody that is anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist, intersection is very important. And by intersection, I'm not just talking about identities in the sense of gay or trans or black or brown or male or female. This goes into the cycle and the analysis of how we're treated and the way in which we are serving the system. And so one of the things that was brought up was that earlier, I think it was chapter 2 or chapter 3, but Bell Hooks was talking about how we are conditioned to be more violent as men because it serves the purpose of imperialism, right? It serves the purpose of us being able to go to other countries and do heinous acts on behalf of a government so that the government can have full control over the system, have full control over resources, people, institutions. And so they use this part of us, or they say that this is part of us, that we are innately violent. And we're conditioned, this part of us within our society. And then the blowback from us being conditioned this way influences our families, influences the way we treat one another on a day-to-day basis, whether it's just being out and about, whether it's in our lives, as far as work concerns, in our lives as far as dealing with, the government outside of policing or something like that. It could be include policing. It could be dealing, with how we treat one another, when it comes to our politics and our views of certain things, right? Like how many of us have this peace through strength type of mentality when it comes to our politics, right? When in reality, that peace through strength, where has that gotten us? But a lot of us men, we have this mentality because it's force-fed into us to say, you're violent, you're inherently violent. You have to use that violence to protect your people. When in reality, are we really inherently violent as men? Is that really just is that a lie that's told to us in order to serve a purpose for the billionaire class? Well, speaking of which, we're going to be talking about work. So, chapter 6, we're going to be getting into it. This one has to deal with work and how we're juxtaposed against women when it comes to work, how it affects us working within the capitalist system. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get into this book, is because it also talks about how our identity as males and how it is used as a tool for the capitalist system to keep us within a box so that we serve the masters. Oh, it's going to be good. Get the tea, get the tea, get the tea, get the tea ready, get the tea ready. It's going to be good. Okay. Good on that tea. So we're going to be starting on page 91. The tea just hit. Can you count? Can you tell? All right. So page 91, chapter 6. Work. What's love got to do? Got to do? What's love? A second-hand emotion. What's work got to do? Got to do it. Okay. Sorry, I'm being silly now because the tea is taking effect. But anyways, let's start. It says, before feminist movement, boys were more likely to be taught at home and at school that they will find fulfillment in work. Today's boys hear a slightly different message. They are told that money offers fulfillment and that work is a way to acquire money, but not the only way. Winning the lottery, finding a wealthy partner, or committing a crime for which you do not get caught are paths to fulfillment that are as acceptable as working. Now, the part about crime being, gang activity, selling illicit substances on the street corners, things like that, as being legitimate as long as you don't get caught, right? It could be, running Ponzi schemes. It could be theft, whatever. These attitudes about the nature of work in patriarchal society have changed as capitalism has changed the nature of work. Few men, either now or in the future, can expect a lifetime of full employment. Nowadays, working men of all classes experience periods of unemployment. In order to keep the faith, patriarchal culture has had to offer men different criteria for judging their worth than work. I'm going to read that again. In order to keep the faith, patriarchal culture has had to offer men different criteria for judging their worth than work. As a primary foundation of patriarchal self-esteem, work has not worked for masses of men for some time. Rather than throw out the whole outmoded patriarchal script so that the nature of work in our culture can be changed, men are offered addictions that make unsatisfying work more bearable. Patriarchal obsession with sex and pornography it produces are promoted to soothe men subliminally while they perform jobs that are tedious, boring, and oftentimes dehumanizing, jobs where their health and well-being are at risk. Most male workers in our America, like their female counterparts, work in exploitative circumstances. The work they do and the way they are treated by superiors are often more than not undermines self-esteem. So, stopping here really quick. How many of you, and I'm talking to men here, how many of you, when you get home from work, you need some type of mind-altering substance in order to get away? Right? That could be, taking in a little bit of the Jolly Green Giant. That could be accessing the dopamine receptors in here through certain bodily functions. I have to be very careful what I say. That could be the dopamine you get by, doing other things. It could be playing a video game, right? It could be alcohol. It could be many other different things. But in order to unwind, to get out of the rut that we are exposed to. We have to do this, right? But women have to do this too. But it's more on our shoulders, it feels, as men, because that's the culture that we have, especially in this country, right? Your worth is in how much you make, right? It's not even in work as much anymore, because like I showed somebody on Twitter about a day ago, 40 to 60% of homeless or unhoused people have jobs. They have jobs. So it's not having a job necessarily that gives you your worth anymore. It's how much money you got. This is why people look at Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Peter Thiel with glowing eyes and say, oh my God, they are the pinnacle of manliness, somehow because they were able to swindle and exploit their way to the top. And that's what we're being displayed as men. You'll have people like, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name already. I can see his face in my head. Andrew Tate, right? He'll show off him flying in a private jet. He'll show off his cars, him smoking cigars. He'll be in front of a big old fireplace and saying that all of this I've acquired makes me more of a man than you. You'll have these streamers on TikTok, these young guys that will have these really nice cars and really nice houses and be able to go on these really nice trips because somehow that makes them more of a man than you because they have more money. It doesn't matter that they have a job. It matters is that they make more money than you. Basically saying that my money makes me more of a man. My money increases the size of my phallus, so to speak, so I am better than you. But in reality, are they really? It's funny, and I hate to get on this topic, but some of you super machismo men out there, guess what? By the time you're really, really old, you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be in nursing homes. Y'all going to be in nursing homes, and ain't nobody going to be visiting you. And where does that leave you? My question is, your worth as a man will show up when you need it to. And when you need it to will be when you are in your old age. Because of the trees and the seeds that you planted along the way. And those trees and seeds that you plant along the way are ones that are well watered and put in good soil by the way you treated others and the way you've affected the world in a positive way. Some of y'all need to wise up. One of the anti-feminist patriarchal sentiments that has gained ground in recent years is the notion that masses of men used to be content to slave away at meaningless labor to fulfill their role as providers, and that it is feminist insistence on gender equality and that workforce has created male discontent. Underlying this assumption is the notion that women coming into the workforce, no longer looking to their men to be sole providers for their family, have undermined the well-being of men in patriarchal culture. Yet many sociological studies of men at work done prior to feminist movement indicate that males were already expressing grave discontent and depression about the nature and meaning of work in their lives. This discontent does not receive the attention that male workers receive when they blame their unhappiness with the world of work on feminist movements. We were sick and tired of the boss before y'all came into the workforce. Go ahead, look at the history, right? Look at the Battle of Blair Mountain. How many women were in that Battle of Blair Mountain? If there were any, there were probably very few. But the thing is, like, men were discontent with their work because of the exploitation. So we've always been discontented with working, especially within the capitalist system, because of the exploitation. We're tired of it. We're sick of it. We hate it. So I think one of the points that Bell Hooks is bringing out here is that our discontent with work isn't necessarily because women aren't in the workforce. It's because we're being exploited. Now, does it make it more competitive now that we have women in the workforce and now we have to compete with women as well? Yeah. But at the same time, it's, it's not anything that is hard to deal with. Meaning, let me continue reading because Bell Hooks actually addresses this. Let's continue. In her massive journalistic treatise, Stiff, the Portrayal of the American Man, Susan Faludi documents the reality that some males, especially older men, felt that changes in the valuation and nature of work, as well as competition with women for jobs, robbed them of the pride in being providers, creating what she calls a masculinity crisis. She says, the outer layer of the masculinity crisis, men's loss of economic authority, was most evident in recessionary winds of the early 90s. As the devastation of male unemployment grew even fiercer, the role of family breadwinner was plainly being undermined by economic forces that spat many men back into a treacherous job market during corporate consolidations and downsizings. Even the many men who were never laid off were often gripped with the fear that they could be next, that their footholds as providers were frighteningly unsteady. Masses of men in our culture may believe that their ability to provide for themselves and their families is a measure of their manhood, yet they often do not actually use their resources to provide for others. So the thing is like, even still, like, it's still a patriarchal culture. So men are still, favored as far as pay and positions in certain areas. So even still, I don't think men really feel that threat. They may have felt that threat maybe 30, 40 years ago. Actually, further back than that. But I also see that as something that's more for white men to have to contend with, because Black women have been in the workforce ever since we've been stolen and brought here. Black women have been in the workforce. It's not, oh, well, you got your little wife at home. You know what I'm saying? Nah, Black women have been in the workforce. It's really a class thing. It's partly class, but it's definitely racial. So the whole women in the workforce, Black women, because here's the thing, the domestic work, a lot of Black women were working in homes of white women and helping them raise their kids, clean their houses, cook their food. So therefore, Black women have been in the workforce since the beginning. So the whole like women coming into workforce was really more of a white thing than it was a Black thing. I don't think a lot of people realize that, right? So we, Black men have had, maybe not having women within our particular sectors, but women have always been in the workforce. And I would argue, there's probably a decent chunk of working class and working poor white women that were in the workforce as well. But I don't think maybe to the degree of Black men and women, like the ratio, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, feminist theorists, myself included, have for some time now called attention to the fact that the behavior of men who make money yet refuse to pay alimony or child support, or their peers who head households yet squander their paycheck on individual pleasures, challenges the patriarchal insistence that men are eager to be caretakers and providers. Barbara Ehrenreich's The Hearts of Men was one of the first books highlighting the reality that many men are not eager to be providers, that the very idea of playboy was rooted in the longing to escape his role and have another means of providing one's manhood. Male heads of households who give a meager portion of their wages for the needs of their family can still have the illusion that they are providers. Nowadays, women's incomes can be the backup money that allows many patriarchal men to squander their paycheck on drugs, alcohol, gambling, or sexual adventures, even as they lay claim to being the provider. Hang on. So here's the thing. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this really bluntly. Some men shouldn't be fathers. Some men shouldn't be husbands. Because of a system that forces us to have kids so that we can replace or replenish the human capital stock, a lot of men were forced into being fathers. Cry with your mama about it. I don't care. Just like a lot of women were forced to be mothers because of our society and because of our system. A lot of women were forced to be mothers. A lot of men were also forced to be fathers. There are probably a man and a woman who probably have relations with each other that probably didn't want the kid, but they had to have the kid because of societal standards, because of societal conditioning. Some men shouldn't have been fathers. Let's be real. And so then the ones who really didn't want the duty, they acted it out. But societal conditioning said, you better have that kid and you better take care of that kid. And it's like they took care of the kid to the point where it's lawfully permissible, right? Just barely lawfully permissible. But they showed that they really didn't want to. And so we put this expectation, and this is why people, there may be some people who are, against contraceptives or abortion and things like that, which is fine. You can have your opinions. But my thing is if you're not creating a contingency in place for us to not have miserable families, I mean, or if you're not creating a system where there may be a man that may not want to be a father, and so you create a system where even if he's irresponsible, that doesn't fall on the people who are the other parties involved, because it happens. If you're not creating a contingency in place for them, are you really creating a system that works for people? And sometimes the system may be because the dad's dead. You know what I'm saying? Anyway. Today's male worker struggles to provide economically for himself. And if he is providing for self and family, his struggle is all the more rigorous and the fear of failure all the more intense. Men who make a lot of money in this society and who are not independently wealthy usually work long hours, spending much of their time away from the company of loved ones. This is one circumstance they share with men who do not make much money, but who also work long hours. Work stands in the way of love for most men, then because the long hours they work often drain their energies. There's little or no time left for emotional labor, for doing the work of love. The conflict between finding time for work and finding time for love and loved ones is rarely talked about in our nation. It is simply assumed in patriarchal culture that men should be willing to sacrifice meaningful emotional connections to get the job done. No one has really tried to examine what men feel about the loss of time with children, partners, loved ones, and the loss of time for self-development. The workers Susan Faludi highlights in Stiff do not express concern about having enough time for self-reflection and emotional connection with self and others. This is why everybody visits mama when she's in the nursing home, but nobody visits daddy, because daddy has been so busy working and having to slave because of patriarchal culture that he doesn't have time for his kids. And so therefore he does not have actual time with his kids in order to be able to develop a meaningful relationship with them. Because we put it all on men instead of having an equal and equitable system with emphasis on proper social welfare. This is why we'll be quick to give maternity leave for mothers, but we won't give paternity leave or just pay parental leave for fathers. Because just because, you got the secret ingredient and got her pregnant doesn't mean that you're still not vital as a role in the kid's life. But the problem is that we as a patriarchal culture, we diminish the emotional impact of fathers because we need them to divorce themselves from their emotional impact, divorce themselves from their emotions, and divorce themselves from the emotions of their kids. And then what do? We go out there and we work. And then guess what? We're told, well, the electric bill's paid, the mortgage or the rent's paid, and all these things. And that's how I show you I love you. And it's like, bro, that's not all. There are multiple love languages, and acts of service is just one, and that's not the only one. And we all just don't cater ourselves to just one love language. We have love languages of all of them. And yet you're focused just on one or two. And you need to be focused on all, it's all encompassing. The problem is what we're taught that, well, see these lights, you got these lights on, see that PS5 or that Nintendo Switch, that shows you I love you. And it's like, sometimes it has to be more than that. It has to be something here in time. But the problem is that because of the system, it tears fathers away. Tears fathers away from having to work grueling hours. And every single time they refuse to give a living wage to people, guess what? That tears parents away from their kids. Every single time we have a system where rent continues to skyrocket, where food prices continue to skyrocket, that's literally also tearing parents away, the time that they need to be with their kids away, so that they end up having a less substantial relationship with their kids. Think about this. Think about how many parents were in households where one parent got to stay home and one parent had to work. But the thing is, it's funny. If all you needed to work was 30 hours a week, just by yourself, and the other parent didn't have to work at all, imagine how much time that you had between parents. Or if both parents both work 15 hours a week, imagine how much time you can have with your parents. But guess what? As things become more expensive and they start paying less, that one parent is now having to work 40 hours a week. Then prices go up. Now that parent may have to work overtime, and they're working 50 hours a week. Now, guess what? Prices go up even more. The other parent has to go into the workforce. So now you have two parents in the workforce, and then prices go up. And now that parent goes from working part-time to full-time. Now that parent is unable to be there when you get home from school. So now you may have to go to daycare or after-school programs. Or you might have to be what some of us were latchkey kids, where we came home, unlocked the door, locked the door behind us, grab some cereal or grab a bologna and cheese sandwich, plop ourselves in front of the TV. Do not answer that door unless unless it's me or your grandmom or something, or just don't answer the door at all. And then we sat in front of that TV. And then we ate stuff that was high in salt, fat, and sugar while getting obese. See how everything just dominates? It's a domino effect. And plus, we don't, as far as eating healthy meals, we don't have parents to be home to have something cooked for us when we get home anymore either. And then parents start working even more. And so guess what? They don't have time to cook. So guess where they go? They go get a bucket of chicken at KFC. They're going to Mickey D's, right? They're going to Chick-fil-A. They're going to all these different fast food places in order to be able to order something so that their kids don't starve, but they don't have the time to cook. And they need time to unwind. And it also gives the parents no time to be able to be with each other in order to develop and keep their relationship going, which means that strife starts bumping heads. Then the kids, guess what? It reflects on the kids, which means that more trauma builds. And then guess what? We get addicted to mind-altering substances in order to be able to cope. And then sometimes these mind-altering substances have blowback on the families. You got to see the connections here, right? Because a lot of times people don't think about how a capitalist system really does ruin the family. It took the tribe away from us, right? And the tribe being not just mom, dad, kids, the nuclear family. Now we're sending grandma and grandpa off to the home because nobody has time or energy to be able to, to take care of them, right? We don't have time for extended family because the extended family also are just, swamped with work. We don't have that village that it takes to raise a child anymore. And all of this is because of a system where it drives you apart. There's very little research that documents the extent to which depression about the nature of work leads men to act violently in their domestic lives. Contemporary patriarchy has offered disappointed male workers a trade-off. The perks of manhood that a depressed economy takes away can be redeemed in the calm of the sexual through domination of women. When what world of sexuality is not fulfilling, males rage. In actuality, women are wary of male domination in the sexual sphere, particularly. And rather than making for greater domestic bliss, men's turning to sex for the satisfaction that they do not receive at work intensifies strife. The movement of masses of women into the workforce has not undermined male workers economically. They still receive the lion's share of both jobs and wages. It has made women who work feel more entitled to resist domination than men who stay home dependent on a man's wages to survive. This is an interesting part because back then, a lot of women had to stay married because if they didn't, then they would have to go be homeless or lead a life of extreme poverty because work was, particularly among white people, was a male dominated field. And so they couldn't. It was rough that way. And so even if they were being abused, even if they were being mistreated, it could be just emotionally, it didn't have to be physically. They had to stay with them. Or even if there wasn't really love there, they had to stay because ultimately, how were they going to provide for themselves and their kids? And so work in a way was liberating for them because they didn't have to depend on him to provide materially as much anymore. And yes, did the divorce rate go up? Yeah, the divorce rate went up. But it also meant that women were free from the shackles of having to stay with men that they did not want. And also freed men from the shackles of staying with women that they didn't want. So there's that. Working class and middle income women I have spoken with talk about the extent to which working outside the home after years of staying home bolstered their self-esteem and provided them with a different perspective on relationships. These women often began to place greater demands on male spouses and lovers for emotional engagement. Faced with these demands, working men often wish that the little women would stay home so that he could wield absolute power, no matter the amount of his paycheck. In many cases, when a woman's paycheck is more than that of her male partner, he acts out to restore his sense of dominance. He may simply confiscate her paycheck and use it as he desires, thus rendering her dependent. He may increase his demands for sexual favors, and if that does not work, he can simply withhold sex, thus making a working woman who desires sex feel her power undermined. Yeah, it's funny because some men will say we don't want our wives to work because we don't want them to have to deal with the stresses of being uh, in the workforce. However, the question is, do they want to? If they want to, okay, right? And that goes into the whole gender role thing that I have an issue with. I honestly really do not care which person works and which person stays home and takes care of the kids. The job just needs to be done. Just get it done. Who has the education and the ability to be able to pull it, not just pull in more money, but also be able to emotionally and mentally and physically deal with the bandwidth that's required for that type of work? Now, asking that for having a single parent household is a privileged take because most people can't do that. Both have to work because that's ultimately how our society is now. But if you do have the privilege of being able to have a single person household, a single income household, while providing for everybody, does it really matter? Like, look, here's the thing. If you're a straight or if you're in a heterosexual relationship, and if the woman actually makes more money or has the propensity to make more money, are you really going to cry and moan that she makes more or that she could be the one providing for the funds for the house? Can't you just go on YouTube and take some cooking lessons, bro? Can't you learn how to quiet a crying baby on YouTube? Can you look things up? I mean, come on, bro. Like, it's not, you can do these different things. It's like not that difficult as far as, taking that part of the job of being a home taker, giver, and provider seriously. Like, we can do it. And it's not an easy job, just like going to work is not an easy job, but you can do it. It can be done. As long as it gets done, Anywho, let me continue. Most women who work long hours come home and work a second shift taking care of the household chores. They feel like their male counterparts that there is little time to do emotional work, to share feelings and nurture others, like their male counterparts. They may simply want to rest. Working women are far more likely than other women to be irritable. They're less open to graciously catering to someone else's needs than the rare woman who stays home all day, who may or may not take care of children, caretake children. Domestic households certainly suffer with sexism decrees that all emotional care and love should come from women. In the face of the reality that working women, like their male counterparts, often come home too tired to deliver the emotional goods. Sexist men and women believe that the way to solve this dilemma is not to encourage men to share the work of emotional caretaking, but rather to return to more sexist gender roles. They want more women, especially those with small children, to stay home. And that's another piece that I think a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to the variables. We talk about, oh, the emotional caretaking needs to be done by the women in the house. No, because like we said before, both genders are capable of having both energies, both masculine and feminine. Therefore, we should have the propensity to be able to help children, raise children to emotionally regulate both of us. And it should not fall directly just on women. We as men need to be able to teach our young kids how to emotionally regulate in a healthy way. And it should not always be when your father comes home. And it's why it's always, oh, he's the disciplinarian. No. No. Your father's face shouldn't be the face that you always see when you are in trouble and then you get scared. Unfortunately, we live in a system where it's, oh, well, the father has to be the one to, get at that ass and provide the punishment. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, no, both parents should be tasked with the emotional regulation and helping. And then we also should extend this out to being, more of a village. But the problem is we put it, these certain gender roles, which in reality don't actually help us become a better society. Let me continue. Take a sip of my tea. My tea is good. Here's where it gets good. Of course, those who do not critique the economy that makes it necessary for all adults to work outside the home. Instead, they may pretend that feminism keeps women in the workforce. Most women work because they want to leave the house and because their families need the income to survive. Not because they are feminists who believe that their working is a sign of liberation. When individual men stay home to do the work of homemaking and child rearing, the arrangement is still viewed as unnatural by most observers. Rather than being viewed as doing what they should do as people in relationships, homemaking men are seen as especially chivalrous, as sacrificing the power and the privileges they could have as privileged male workers outside of the home in order to do a woman's work inside the home. It has been through assuming the role of participatory, loving parents that individual men have dared to challenge sexist assumptions and do work inside the home that also invites them to learn relational skills. They document the rightness of feminist theory that argues that if men participated equally in child rearing, they would, like their female counterparts, learn how to care for the needs of others, including emotional needs. Even though more men actively parent to some degree than ever before in our nation's history, this is also really true, especially of Black men in the home. Black men are a lot more involved in their kids' lives these days than they were back in the day. Actually, I think some studies said is they are the most involved out of all racial groups too. The vast majority of men still refuse to play an equal role in the emotional development of their children. They often use work as the excuse for emotional estrangement. Whether they regard themselves as pro or anti-feminist, most women want men to do more of the emotional work in relationships. And most men, even those who are wholeheartedly support gender equality in the workforce, still believe that emotional work is female labor. Most men continue to uphold the sexist decree that emotions have no place in the work world and that emotional labor at home should be done by females. Many men use work as the place where they can flee from the self, from emotional awareness, where they can lose themselves and operate from a space of emotional numbness. Unemployment feels so emotionally threatening because it means that there will be time to fill, and most men in patriarchal culture do not want time on their hands. Victor Seidler expresses his fear of having downtime in rediscovering masculinity, confessing, "I have learned how hard it is to give myself time, even an hour for myself a day. There are always things I am supposed to be doing. A feeling of panic and anxiety emerges at the very thought of spending more time with myself." He argues that most men have such a limited sense of self that they are uncertain that they possess selves we could want to relate to. He contends we only seem to learn that the self is something we have to control tightly, since otherwise it might upset our plans. We never really give ourselves much chance to know ourselves better or develop more contact with ourselves, since all this threatens the control we have been brought up to identify our masculinity with. We feel trapped, though we do not know how we are constantly remaking this trap for ourselves. Competition with other men in the workplace can make it all the more difficult for men to express feelings or to take time alone. The male who seeks solitude in the workplace, especially during downtime, is seen as suspect. Yet, when men gather together at work, they rarely have meaningful conversations. They jeer, they grandstand, they joke, but they do not share feelings. They relate in a scripted, limited way, careful to remain within the emotional boundaries set by patriarchal thinking about masculinity. The rules of patriarchal manhood remind them that this is their duty as men to refuse relatedness. Why do you think men love sports? Because you get to share in that emotional bond with men. And it's an acceptable sphere that you can do it. Because if you do it outside of sports, you're seen as less than. Even though male workers like Kenneth Blanchard, author of The 1 Minute Manager and co-author of The Power of Ethical Management, share the wisdom that emotional skills could be cultivated by men to improve the nature of work and work relations, most work settings remain places where emotional engagement most work settings remain places where emotional engagement between workers, especially bosses and a subordinate, is deemed bad for business. Were more men in touch with their relational skills and their emotional life, they might choose work that would at least sometimes enhance their well-being. Although women with class privilege, such as Susan Faludi or Susan Bordeaux, who write about men, express surprise that most men do not see themselves as powerful, women who have been raised in poor and working class homes have always been acutely aware of the emotional pain of the men in their lives and of their work dissatisfactions. Has Susan Faludi read the work of feminist women of color writing about their poor and working class men whom we know most intimately, she would have not have been surprised to find masses of men troubled in discontent. Women with class privilege have always been the only group who have perpetuated the notion that men are all powerful, because often the men in their families were powerful. When Faludi critiques the popular feminist notion that men are all powerful, she counts on the ignorance of readers about feminist writings to perpetuate the notion that feminists have not understood male pain. It serves her argument to promote this inaccurate portrait. And this is another thing. A lot of times we talk about how a lot of men, we're dominated and exploited, and we do not feel powerful. And so therefore, sometimes we may even take that out, in people in our household. The problem is that we feel powerless a lot of the times because of it. And the thing is that when it comes to working class and more poorer households, the women in our lives may see that. The problem is that in more affluent households where the woman just stays home and, goes according to the gender roles and takes care of the kids at home, well, she doesn't really see this because she doesn't see how powerless he feels because he's bringing home the bacon, or he may just be the boss, or he may be the exploitative capitalist. Visionary feminists were writing about the fact that working class men, far from feeling powerful, were terribly wounded by the patriarchy long before Faludi conceived of Stift. And it is difficult to imagine that she was not aware of that writing. It is disingenuous of her as well to act as though the liberation movement that women created to confront their problem with no name addressed women cross class lines. Feminist movement has had very little impact on the masses of working women who were in the workforce prior to the movement and who still remain there, just as dissatisfied and discontent with their lot as the men in their lives. Poor and working class women have always known that the everyday work experience places men in an environment where they feel powerless and where they are unable to articulate on that patriarchal terms. To use Faludi's words, they feel less than masculine. Just as feminist gains in this nation primarily have had positive impact on women with class privilege, the working men who have been given permission within the contours of patriarchal culture to reconfigure the nature of work in their lives tend to have class power. In the late 80s and early 90s, a number of popular movies portrayed powerful men, either through the illness or crisis, evaluating their lives and choosing to make profound changes in the nature of work. In the recent film, Life as a House, a white male architect whose work was being devalued quits, finds out that he has cancer, only a short time to live, and engages in a process of rethinking patriarchy, though, of course, that term is not used. Evaluating his life, he chooses to use his remaining months to make emotional connections with family, especially his teenage son, and with friends. He spends his time learning how to give and receive love. His ex-wife's wealthy businessman husband, inspired by the example of the dying man, and rethinks the nature of his life and resolves to give less time to work and more time to emotional connections. This film, like its predecessors, makes clear that the working men must make time to get in touch with their emotional selves if they are to become men of feeling. I'm going to stop there because I'm reaching an hour, but this is profound because a lot of times we get to a point where we look at men and work. And by men and work, I mean feminists will look at men and work and say, well, we dominate the field, but The issue is that men are dominating other men in the workplace too. It's kind of funny. I remember this scripture out of the Bible. It's kind of funny. I was an evangelical for years, but I forget the actual one where it says, "Man has dominated man to his injury." Capitalism is a system that requires some people to be exploited. This even means men exploiting men, and those men that are exploited have to exploit the women. And then sometimes the women have to exploit the children. Don't believe me? Go to Dr. Joy DeGrew's post-traumatic slave syndrome and look at the rate of murders by white female slave owners and their victims being slave children. The thing is that a lot of times it's the system that causes the vicious cycle of exploitation to happen in the first place. Patriarchy is a tool of capitalism, just like racism and bigotry. Different forms of bigotry are tools of capitalism in order to keep a divide, a clear divide between different groups so that we don't band together in order to fight against the operators of the system. This is why we have these gender wars, right? Gender wars of how, oh, well, I'm a high value man. Are you a high value woman? What do you bring to the table? Baby, no matter what your gender is, as long if you're not bringing solidarity, you ain't bringing nothing. And that solidarity has to come with taking any type of bigoted thoughts that we may have, whether it be gender, whether it be sexual orientation, gender identity, whether it be race, it could be class, it could be any of that sphere, it could be ableism. We got to toss that out, including with the very people we share our lives with. Do you have solidarity with your spouse? Do you have solidarity with your partner, with your boyfriend, girlfriend, partner? Do you have solidarity with them? Sometimes we got to take these notions that are pumped into us, and we have to examine them and break them down to what they really are. And who does it serve? Does it serve us, or does it serve the corporate master? Right? Like, for instance, if men were the ones who gave birth to children, we will be the ones forced to stay at home and take care of the kids without making actual money or being compensated for it. We would be. It just so happens to fall on a woman because she grows a child in her womb. But that's it. Because they need that human capital stock. They need her to stay home just until the child reaches working age. And then 2 years after 16, they're booted out the house so that they can come work for Mr. Thompson in his factory. Because they need to keep it that way to churn out more workers. This is also why they favor anti-abortion laws. That's a whole nother conversation. They want to keep you churning babies out. Why do you think they're so against contraceptives too? Because they want you to have that whoops. They want those whoops babies. That means that's more human capital stock every single time. That's what it is. And the thing is like, this is why it is so important for us to see things. Look, you as a man, learning to emotionally regulate, learning to tap into your emotions to be a full, complete human is actually an act of resistance. Walking away from the gender role thing is actually an act of resistance. You being a man and learning how to emotionally regulate yourself and teaching your kids to emotionally regulate, no matter the gender of your child, that is also resistance against the system. Having solidarity with your spouse, not just loving your spouse, but having solidarity with your spouse, that is an act of resistance against the system. That's something that a lot of people aren't talking about. This is something I think that is very deeply important. Knowing who we are, being able to sit with that, being able to sit with the sadness, being able to sit with the fear, be able to sit with the wonder, to be that little boy before they severed that tie when you were about 7, 8 years old. Being able to go back to that time when you didn't care or didn't even notice, oh man, you do that, that looks gay, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you acting like a female, blah, blah, blah. So what? I'm being a full version of myself, despite what these motherfuckers think. I want to share this because I think this is important. And I saw this and I found this to be pretty compelling in my view. Let's go.
Massive difference in sensation between these two tattoos. And I don't just mean because this is filled in more. When I got this one, I wasn't on testosterone yet. And the way I spent getting this tattoo is just watching Spider-Man. This one was after testosterone. And it was absolute agony. I thought I was going to pass out. We know that women tend to have a higher pain tolerance than men. But we don't really talk about what that means. That means men are more sensitive. Oh, Devin, but that's just physical. Okay, but what if, for example, I had a tag on this shirt and it was irritating my neck because I'm sensitive physically? Might that make me a little irritated? And mind you, I'm not pro men punching walls and making these things other people's problems and scaring people and hurting people. But I think that this does come into play. Men are consistently invalidated for their discomforts and what they don't want. And it gets to a point where it boils over. But I do think that if we look at men like they're people and get to the root of these frustrations and then teach our boys how to experience their feelings and how to work through things, I think we could have a lot more healthy men out there. I think a lot of our problems would kind of diminish, don't you think?
So, we also got to think, who has the highest rates of suicide? Yeah, men have the highest rates of suicide in this country. And also, hurt people. Finish the sentence. You got it. Hurt people hurt people. So we have to learn how to deal with the deep-seated emotions that are within us to calm these torrential waters within us. And we have to break the cycle because our fathers, our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, our great-great-grandfathers, and a lot of us, our great-great-great-grandfathers, and even beyond, were forced into a box within the system. And that box that they were forced into, they had to teach us to be in that box so we could survive. It was a survival tactic that we had to be stoic, and we had to only use things like our rage as a tool in order to be able to move forward. Because if not, then we were going to starve, or we were going to be unclothed and naked, or we weren't going to have a roof over our heads. Because that's what the capitalist system dictated. It's a different time. And we need to fight against that system. And I want you to think, how much time would you have to learn to be within yourself, to center yourself as a man, if we had housing guaranteed, healthcare guaranteed, education guaranteed? Think about that. Think about how the pressure of you having to be a provider every single time. Think if we took that individualistic idea away and made it into a collectivist situation. Think about it. You'd be able to have time to center yourself more. You'd have more time to really get to know who you are. And imagine how that will reflect upon the other gender. Changing the system of capitalism would benefit men so much that we can actually be our full selves instead of being these robots, rageful robots that these corporate dictators want us to be. We never were robots, and we will never be robots. So therefore, let's resist the system so that we can have something that encourages us to be our full human selves. Go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the comments in the chat. I'm going to check to see if I have any Rumble rants or any chats on Rumble. Looks like we're good there, so we're good. And let's go into Rumble. I'm sorry, Rockman. Oh, man. I see Dave Burton. Let me share the screen. And then I'll do a patron shout out after this. So thank you, Dave Bird. He says, been trying to get in to see this JB video, keeps failing. Ah, man, I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully you'll get to watch it on the rewatch. But I see you, Dave. Thank you very much. Let's go into the chat. Kate Mack says, love your tie, by the way. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Raziel the Great says, happy Saturday, everyone. Slap that like. Slap that like you're slapping a... Never mind. I'm not going to say it. Mouse says, I'm late, but I hit the like. Thank you so very much. Good to see you. Chris C says, hope you're doing well, JB. Smash the like button, of course. Yep, thank you very much. Chris continues, says, capitalism creates a toxic work environment that then trickles into our personal lives. It essentially is a virus. No wonder why Malcolm X calls it a parasite. It needs a host, and we're a symbiote. You see, CBC voter says, happy Saturday at JB. Good to see a CBC voter. Chris C continues, says, never thought of the solidarity with your partner, to be quite honest, especially since emotional support often takes a backseat in most relationships, even if we call it love. Our stress alone would drop. I mean, working 45 to 50 hours a week myself with an inconsistent schedule puts me a toll on me to where I can barely organize, talk with people, and even eat correctly. That's a good point, Chris. Kate Max says, imagine people were getting a living wage. Imagine if, we didn't have to, slave away day in and day out for somebody just so that they can have more time on their hands just by virtue of them exploiting us. Like, I'll be honest with you, capitalism is so anti-family. It's so anti-family. It's anti-human. And the thing is, no wonder why we're so depressed and sad and angry. No wonder why we have mass shootings in this country. No wonder why people are angry and have strife against one another. Because ultimately, we don't have time to be with one another. It keeps us in these boxes. And so then when we finally get around with each other, all we want to do is fight. All we want to do is stay away from each other. And it's contentious and it's sad. Because we're so stressed because we have to stay on this treadmill, this damn rat race called capitalism, where we're constantly being told, well, we have to slave for this one person and make them as much profit as we can in order to be able to have a roof over our heads, food in our mouth, and clothes on our backs. Absolutely not. No. We need to stop. You know what? What's funny? This is why some people voted for Trump. And this is why some people voted for Harris. Because they're looking for a solution, and yet they keep being fooled by both of these parties. Because they think if they go for this one person, then they'll be able to have more ease when it comes to their work-life balance. They don't have to slave away. And they can also make a little bit more, so that then they can have more time with their families and, be with their friends. It's like we're always striving for that, but we go in the direction where the capitalists point us to, when in reality, we need to resist what they're pointing us to and go in the opposite direction where they're trying to point us. That's, and they will demonize those of us who are socialists and communists and go, well, no, they want you to work for free and not get anything. They want you to be in bread lines. And I'm like, no. We want you to get everything that you're owed. That's the difference. These cappies, man, they're devils, man. They exploit you and then they point to the person who wants you to be free. And they'll say, oh, well, they just want to put you in a cage. They're trying to get you out of our circle and put you in that cage. When in reality, it's not a cage. It's outside. And they'll say, well, it's going to rain on you. Or they're not going to be able to provide you food. That's like having wolves in an enclosure, and the wolves get one meal a day, maybe, or they'll just get barely crumbs, but they're in this tiny little enclosure, right? And we try to unlock the gate, and we're trying to go say, hey, come on, let's go. We can be free. But then the zookeepers will go, nah, see, you guys don't want to go with them because we give you guys food on a regular basis, and you guys don't get rained on. Look, we have you inside this concrete box. You guys don't really want to go out there, do you? We got you here. When in reality, it's like, but if we're out there, we'll be able to eat more regularly, more often. And if it rains, we can go under the trees. And in fact, the rain's actually kind of good for us anyway. Like, it's just crazy, man. Anyway, I'm rambling on. But, I mean, that's one of the points I think that a lot of people don't think about. Chris C says, I hate the saying beggars can't be choosers because we have every right to choose, especially if it pertains to health. This is often why I criticize transactional alliances. Yeah. Also, solidarity should not be transactional. I'll say that too. Thank you very much for that, Chrissy. So, with that being said, let's go and shout out the patrons on Patreon. I like to thank you guys for being patrons, because without you guys, would not be able to do the work that I do. So let's go and look at the tiers. We have Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters. We have Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members. And shout out to new members, Horican Libre and Horace Lattimore Jr. Thank you so very much for becoming new patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this work. And by the way, in addition to and furthermore, my channel is demonetized. So if you like to support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. So thank you so much for that. So I'm going to get going. I'm running a little later than I wanted to, but I just wanted to make sure I got that much reading in, because I have missed out on reading this for a couple months, actually, since I was doing the work on the campaign. And I want to make sure I got a hefty reading in for you guys as well. And I'll try to make sure I'm back on schedule next week for the rest of the reading. So I'll get back to the next one. I'll be reading Presidential again by Margie Kimberly, then Of Water and the Spirit again by Melodoma Patrice Some. And then we'll get back to The Will to Change by next week, okay? So be sure to tune in tomorrow for RBN, for the JB show. I will be having on Rathbone. We will be having a discussion about censorship, and then I have a news story after that. And then I also have a decent show already planned for this Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on my channel. So be sure to tune in for that as well. And the next couple of weeks, I actually have a few guests coming in too. So it should be good. All right. Well, with that being said, I'm going to head on out. Like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves. Leave the world better than you found it. Smoke them if you got them. Drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny, because joy is revolutionary. Or read, because reading is fundamental. I love you guys for watching, and I thank you guys for watching very much from the top and bottom of my heart. And mwah, forehead kisses to every single one of you, because that's just the way I roll. And I hope you guys roll that way with everybody you come in contact with too. Love the world and love yourselves. Remember, you matter. All right? I love you. Have a good one. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.